Morning.
Morning.
Go ahead and move the microphone wherever you need it. Just make sure you're speaking into the microphone. Thank you. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Whippel.
Are you the same Kruizenga who caused direct testimony in Exhibits 1 through 3 to be filed in this matter on July 24th, 2023?
I am.
Do you affirm that testimony as if you were asked the same questions here today?
Yes.
Do you have any additions or corrections to make to that filed testimony?
Not at this time.
Your Honor, I move the admission of the witness's testimony and exhibits. Is there objection? Seeing no objection, the board will admit the testimony and exhibits.
And thank you, Your Honor, in which case we tender the witness for cross-examination.
Thank you. Going once. Mr. London.
Morning, Mr. Kruizenga.
Good morning.
I just have a couple clarification questions for you. In your written testimony, it indicates that you spent 5 years working as the county inspector for numerous Iowa counties during the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Is that right?
That's correct.
The Dakota Access Pipeline was not being constructed on a day-to-day basis over a 5-year period. Is that fair?
Active construction.
Sure. So
that included remediation.
Okay. The actual construction of the pipeline itself occurred in 2016 primarily. Is that correct?
Primarily.
And then there was some reclamation activities, of course, thereafter in 2017. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then for those next 3 years, was it primarily just some punch list items that were outstanding? You were not actually out in the field inspecting every single day?
Yeah, there were punch list items all over the state after that.
With respect to that project, you were not actually the county inspector. You were working for the person that was the county inspector. Is that fair?
Can you say that again?
Sure. Was Evan Delval the county inspector for ISG during the DAPL project?
Evan Delval was the engineer in charge of the county inspection. County inspection is to be have the oversight of an engineer by Iowa Code. He was the engineer on the project. So,
are you a licensed engineer?
I'm not.
Are you an agronomist?
I'm not.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Jorde.
Yes, so you, I guess, based on those questions, had experience in inspecting and working on and physically viewing and actually being on the land where the Dakota Access Pipeline was both constructed and remediated. Is that right?
Correct.
And other than what you have in your testimony, what are the main lessons learned from your on-the-ground experience, given that, as I'm sure you're aware, there have been quite a bit of complaints about how that construction process occurred? Do you have any lessons learned?
Well, with the Dakota Access, there hadn't been a project to that scale since the 70s before that. So Iowa Code was, lacking before that project, and since has been revised. But as far as lessons learned, we need to keep the contractors off right away when conditions aren't suitable. Many instances, some of these parcels or tracts are still experiencing major crop deficiencies to this day, 7 years later, because of those construction practices. So,
and when you say keeping them off, do you think that having a county inspector or that as a condition solves all of that, or I mean, how do you think, based on your experience, you can actually kind of keep construction folks from not wanting to do what they're there to do, which is continue to construct?
Well, at the time of Dakota Access, we really didn't have that authority. I mean, the only real thing we had to lean on was possible damage to underground drainage structure. Well, when I went to them to say, hey, they're going through standing water all over the place, you're probably damaging tile. can you say that definitively was the response? I'm like, no, and I know I can't make you dig it up, but I'm going to tell you you're going to have to fix a lot of tile next spring. And they just said, well, looks like we'll be fixing a lot of tile. I don't think that's the right approach to a project of that magnitude. So,
Okay. And based on the changed Iowa code, are you saying you think that has covered everything we need to be concerned about, or from your experience, are there still areas that need special consideration?
I think it gives the county inspector more authority to stop it, but I would like more clarification on wet conditions definition. Just because I can stop it doesn't mean they're not going to question it. So we need something to point to other than just my opinion that it's too wet. So whatever that is or whatever that looks like, I would really like that as part of the permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I don't have anything further.
Ms. Grunehagen?
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Chris Grunehagen, and I'm representing the Iowa Farm Bureau in these proceedings, and I just have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Were you the county inspector for Keokuk County during the Dakota Access construction?
Yes, ma'am.
Or I should say you were part of the construction county inspector team.
Yeah, I was the chief inspector over the whole state of Iowa for that project, and we had Keokuk County as one of our counties that had hired us for that project.
And as part of the county inspectors, do you have some experience with issues involving topsoil separation?
Yes.
Do you think that the new requirement for topsoil surveys is going to help resolve the issues with identifying that depth of topsoil?
Yeah, I think that helps with that. I don't know that you still have to take it off, and that's up to the contractor, but that helps determine broadly what that topsoil depth may be. And of course it can differ field to field or county to county, but yeah.
Do you think there still might be some disagreements between the landowners and the contractor about whether they've removed enough topsoil?
Yeah, knowing Iowa landowners, I would say that's probably possible. Yeah.
Would you be comfortable with having the authority to resolve those disputes?
Yeah, based off the topsoil survey and soil scientists, ag inspectors, and county inspectors, I would hope that we could resolve a conflict like that, yes.
Very good. On page 5 of your testimony, you talk about addressing wet conditions, and that's been a conflict point between landowners and contractors. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And is that why you're looking for a more objective test for determining wet conditions?
Yes, I appreciate the authority to do that, but also I think you need to have some merit behind that authority. Something to point to that said, yes, you can't work today, this is why. Whatever that might be, that's for somebody other than me to decide, but I think it's important.
Since you were the county inspector in Keokuk County, do you recall any disagreements about construction and wet conditions between Dakota Access and a landowner named Steve Rocky?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you remember about that?
Well, Dakota Access, once they had the topsoil removed, they just worked no matter what happened. If it rained an inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, it didn't matter. They had track hoes and dozers out there mopping it, taking all the slop off the top, and they just kept working. So, to anybody, a farmer, anybody driving by, they would never do that, so Yeah, there was a lot of that went on.
So what were the field conditions like at the time of construction? Do you remember?
If I remember right, they had some rain events come through there. They were at times sloppy, at times they were fine. But I remember them having to take dozers and push piles of subsoil slop up to try to clean up the right of way and to dry it out. So I do remember that specifically on his, yes.
So did that slop develop because vehicles were running on the soil
Partially.
in combination with the precipitation?
Yes, partially.
And so did they, when you say slop, did they move the mud aside so that they had a firmer surface to drive vehicles on?
Yeah.
Can you describe the process you went through in trying to resolve the disputes regarding wet conditions?
I guess went to the upper management from Energy Transfer, their project managers, to try to say, hey, you're driving compaction, you're affecting underground drainage structures, and at that time there was nothing in the Iowa Code to give us the backing. They knew it, and they just kept proceeding with what they were doing.
And so ultimately, did you feel like you weren't able to address the situation because you didn't have any backing?
Yeah, really, once the topsoil was removed, we didn't have any backing or authority to do anything. But we had a lot of tile to fix the next year, and the next couple of years.
So you appreciate having some firm boundaries of knowing when you can stop construction and not?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer?
So during that previous project, did you have concerns about liability for halting construction? In other words, your personal liability or your firm's liability against lawsuit or being sued in response to any decision made in the field to halt construction because of wet conditions or determination of wet conditions?
No, sir. I mean, if I had the authority to do so, I wouldn't be. The problem is I didn't have the authority to do so. It's like a cop pulling you over saying, I don't like the color of your shirt. It doesn't matter. It's not illegal. That stuff wasn't in the Iowa Code at that time, so I didn't have the authority. So no, I wasn't worried about halting it for that reason. It was just unfortunate I couldn't halt it at all.
Would you, I guess, any inspector that now has that authority, or let's say a drainage district trustee wants to be involved in that discussion and wants to halt, should there be some sort of provision, if it's not already provided by law, but could be provided through the permit provided by this board, to grant some immunity under those circumstances where a wet condition determination has been met, to immunize the decision makers from liability, or require waivers to be signed by Summit and its contractors to protect the inspectors, or let's say drainage trustees? Would that be a good condition to give you a little more confidence out in the field so you don't have to be thinking about lawsuits?
I mean, personally, it wouldn't affect me, because if I have the law behind me and just, clear definition of what I can do, it wouldn't bother me. Maybe some people, the other firms that do county inspection too, maybe they'd be more comfortable with that, but I mean, from my perspective, as long as we have the code behind us and we're not overstepping what our responsibilities are. And no,
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Long?
Thank you, Board Chair. Mr. Kruizenga, I thank you. Oh, I'm over here.
Oh.
Thank you for your testimony. I just want to clarify some things for the record. Do you remember in your discussion with Ms. Grunhagen when you said that you were the lead inspector for Iowa?
I was the chief inspector for ISG. We had 13 of the 18 counties that were affected by Dakota Access.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to clarify, was that you were the lead inspector for your firm, but there were some counties that didn't use your firm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Board questions? Oh, Ms. Colas is back there. Go ahead.
Yes, Jean Colas Family Farms. I had a question with the new laws. Is there a requirement of a specific time that the inspectors need to be on a construction site to do an adequate job?
I don't know if there's a set standard, but I can speak to our company and the people that work for me. Whatever time the contractor shows up is when we'll be on site. Whatever time the contractor leaves is when we leave. That may change on a given day or week, but that's how we approach that as a company.
I was just wondering about the frequency of being on the site, since you might be required to be on several different sites in that county on the same day because they were doing multiple construction.
Sure. Based off how the construction spreads are set up is how we determine how many inspectors we'll need for the different construction practices going on. So if they have 3 tile crews, we'll have 3 tile inspectors with those crews. So that's how we handle staffing.
During the operation of construction.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, Mr. Kruizenga, on page 6 of your direct testimony, you stated that disputes can be difficult to resolve quickly, and that may result in them not being reported. Is this an issue with the county inspector not understanding their role, or is it related to other issues?
No, I don't think it's a role issue. I think they're always going to have a dispute when you tell them they can't proceed, unless it's just blatantly obvious. But can you rephrase your question again? Or I'm sorry, I didn't answer it probably.
No, your testimony, you stated it's difficult to resolve these issues quickly, so sometimes maybe they're not reported. And I'm just kind of wondering, it's more kind of like about the halting process, and is it the county inspector having a problem halting? Is it ISG having a problem halting? Like, what's needed, or where's the hang up?
Now we have the authority to halt. The hang up would be just opinion. So it's my opinion. Let's say I stop construction on it in a given area because it's too wet. My opinion of what's too wet is different from his or hers. So I would like to have some type of definition to what that is, to point to saying, can't work, this is why. And everybody knows it, and there doesn't have to be a discussion after that.
So are you aware, or did ISG have a role to play in the revision of Chapter 9 rules after Dakota Access?
Yes, we were approached by the Iowa Utility Board to do that.
And did you provide any input during that process?
Yes, on a limited basis, as a consultant was called.
So then, in terms of this definition of wetness, was that talked about during the revision of Chapter 9? Why? I mean, if that is something that was prevalent during Dakota Access, I'm just curious, like, why is there not a better definition after that revision?
Well, I would agree with that. I think there was a lot of suggestions. That doesn't mean they were implemented by the Iowa Utility Board. Ultimately, it was their call to decide what they used and what they didn't. So, yeah, I wish that was stronger, obviously, but that's what they came up with.
So did ISG propose any language during that revision time for wetness?
Yes, I can't speak to what that is or what that was.
So if we could open up Chapter 9 today and make revisions and provide you what I'm hearing is what you would like to have is like guardrails, what would that be in the perfect world? What are you looking for? I know what you're looking for, but what would the language be?
It would be pointing to a method or something to make a determination on whether or not it's too wet. Not just someone's opinion. Not just a county inspector's opinion. And I don't know exactly if that's a ball test, if that's a ribbon test, if that's a visual. Obviously, standing water is evident. You shouldn't track to it. But just something definitive that we can point to.
So do you feel like moving forward, if this project were to take place, do you feel like you have the tools and the authority to shut it down due to wet conditions versus what you had with Dakota Access?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's completely different.
So I'm kind of curious of the statement you made earlier. You stated, knowing Iowa landowners. What does that mean?
Well, I just mean everybody has their own definition of what topsoil is. I mean, we worked with 700 different landowners on that project, and I think if you talk to any one of them, they'd have a different determination or definition of what topsoil was. So that's what I meant by that.
So, and again, back to this wet soil condition. So under your proposal, would that put some discretion on Summit Carbon as to whether wet conditions are occurring, thus removing the county inspector's role as the sole person who determines wet conditions?
No, I think it would just give something other than my personal opinion why they shouldn't work.
All right, I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Whippel? No redirect, Your Honor. All right, thank you. You may step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll break at lunch at noon, but we've probably got enough time to get the next witness up and engaged. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. Just a brief update on our discussion earlier this morning. I talked with Mr. Dublinsky during the morning recess, and he indicated Summit would have no cross-examination questions for Professor Jacobson. I don't know about other parties or the board, but Mr. Dublinsky said he would be willing to stipulate to Professor Jacobson's testimony and exhibit and would waive his appearance.